The Tennis Gambling Podcast on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Nordic Fantasy. Best Ball Mania is alive with $15 million in prizes. Sign up with promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to $250 in bonus cash on NordicFantasy.com, promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Royal Retros. Royal Retros has jerseys, t-shirts, hats, jackets, and sweatshirts from all the old-school teams that you love. Use promo code SGPN for 10% off your order today. Let's code SGPN at RoyalRetros.com. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It is currently early Sunday morning, roughly 12:15 a.m. Eastern Time on May 12th. I'm your host, always, Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. Should be a fun episode because it is time to preview the round of 32 in Rome. So we're not going to cover every match, but we are going to cover the ones that kind of catch my eye, and then we'll give out our lock and dog picks at the end of the show. Before into that, though, do want to remind everybody once again to like, subscribe on YouTube. Also, to remind everybody that if you are still listening to the podcast on Spotify or Apple, don't forget to rate and review the podcast. Also, a reminder that we do have some great merchandise on the SGPN merch store. We have t-shirts, we have sweatshirts, a lot of high-quality merchandise for the Tennis Gambling Podcast, so keep that in mind. Also, a reminder that the featured show of the week on SGPN is the baseball show, a show that I'm actually on, the MLB Gambling Podcast. Because if you are a hardcore baseball fan or a DGen sitting in an office looking for some afternoon action, either way, you'll want to get into the MLB action, and the best way to do so is to subscribe and listen to the MLB Gambling Podcast wherever you do get your podcasts. So, getting into the actual recap of the round of 64, do want to start off with the lock and dog picks. Unfortunately, did not sweep, did win the lock. Really annoying loss on the dog. So starting off with the lock, ended up winning with Borges' first set money line at minus 135. We're going to fade Bublik, who had lost a ton of first sets in a row. I actually did promise that I was going to go through his overall season and tell you Bublik's updated first set record. Bublik this year, in 2024, has played 26 matches on the ATP level. 26. He has won the first set 6 times. He is 6-20 in the first set so far this year. So that's why I keep fading Bublik in the first set. Kind of a gambling nugget there. Bublik, even when he does win, he won a title earlier this year in France. He will punt the first set and then he'll end up coming back and winning. He did that in every round of that event. But Bublik, 6-20 in the first set. Kind of sums it up. We cashed the minus 135. For the dog, ended up having a 2-pick parlay. We had Djokovic to win in straight sets and Ruud to win in straight sets. Djokovic ended up getting off to a slow start against Mutet, but Mutet can't serve. Djokovic woke up and he looked incredible for the last set and a half. As for Ruud, he won the first set 6-0 against Kekmanovic, so we figured that we were cruising. He was up 6-0, 40-love in the first service game, got broken, and you ended up having a set where neither guy could serve, and Ruud eventually lost the second set, and to make it funnier, lost the match. So he ended up winning the first set 6-0 and then lost. So kind of embarrassing by Ruud, really annoying loss there because when you win via bagel in the first set, Kekmanovic definitely looked like he was struggling to even win any points in the first set. You kind of figure you're going to cruise, and that didn't happen as Ruud not only ended up blowing the 6-0 lead, but he lost the match outright, which is pretty embarrassing. But either way, ended up splitting. Still a nice one on the lock. And I'll look for a sweep here in the round of 32. Now to get into the actual recap of the round of 64 matches, starting off with the actual Friday matches, going through the early ones. Borges beat Bublik in straight sets. You saw Musetti, who retired. Italian tennis has really underachieved in this event. I know Pizarro's had a dream run. I'll get into that in a second. But Musetti got injured. We know Sonego has been struggling a bit recently in general. Fognini ended up losing to Fritz. It's been kind of a mess. Berrettini withdrew. Sinner withdrew. Not exactly a great tournament for the home country players. Besides that, though, Darderi killed Navone. Kind of a shock there. Thought Navone would be ready to take on the challenge. And unfortunately, I guess he was still exhausted from winning a challenger-level title the previous weekend. Or previous week, I should say. But yeah, Navone kind of no-showed it, and Darderi looked good. So props to Darderi for a good win. Besides that, I mentioned Kotov. I thought would be live to win the match against Shelton. Didn't mind him plus the 3 and the over. The over got there. Unfortunately, though, the money line ended up losing, but the spread ended up pushing as Kotov won the first set and then ended up losing in 3. Zhang ended up beating Manarino. Manarino's a horrible clay player, and that's been the story of the calendar year. Montero continues his great form, beat Thompson in straight sets. Ended up seeing Korda beat Caboli in 3. Thought that would be a marathon that ended up happening. Besides that, Pizarro continues his dream run as he continues to win final set breakers. Ended up having a nice 3-set win after falling behind a set to Griekspoor. You end up seeing Fritz beat Fognini in straight sets. Not too surprising there. Tabilo won. Thought he would beat Hanfman. He did. Djokovic won comfortably. Cerundolo won comfortably. And Ruud choked it away. Ended up losing in 3 sets. Moving on to Saturday. For those matches, you had a kind of an interesting collection of matches because a lot of them were pretty straightforward. A lot of straight set wins. You had a couple of fun matches, though, in general. But it is worth at least pointing out that a decent amount of the matches on Saturday's card were relatively underwhelming. To go through the actual matches, Jari ended up beating Arnaldi in straight sets. Ended up seeing Medjedovic, who I thought would end up beating Fokina, and I did not mind the over in that match. He won 7-6, 6-4. I like Medjedovic a lot. I think he's a good player, so just keep an eye on him moving forward. Echeverry beat Seabold Wild in straight sets. Nadal got absolutely curb stomped. Hurkacz killed him. 6-1, 6-3. First 2 games went to a couple of deuces, and then after that, Nadal was cooked. Nadal at this point in his career is playing out the string. We know that I've mentioned it before on the show, but I'll say it again. He's not going to win any ATP titles in the rest of his career. He's completely, I don't want to say he's on empty, but the lights going on in the car, which tells you you're almost completely at a dead stop. That's where Nadal's at right now. He even mentioned that he's not sure if he's going to play the French Open, which tells you his current form. Not good, just simply put. So Nadal is probably going to be sitting until the French Open. Maybe he'll show up. I'm still not sure if it's going to be his final year or not. He might, in theory, come back for part of 2025. If this is going to be his last year, then I think he has to go to the French Open. But am I going to take him in any matches in the French Open? No. I think that he is definitely a potentially 1 or 2 round guy in the French. Maybe he'll surprise somebody and win a marathon match, but I don't think he has the stamina and the overall, I'd say, durability at this stage in his career to win marathon matches anymore. And I think that Nadal, once again, is really on his last legs of his career. It's a shame, but you know it's going to happen at some point. We know Federer retired after a bunch of injuries. Nadal's abdomen has been an issue for a couple years. And Nadal yesterday just got absolutely destroyed. No way around it. That was the biggest defeat he's ever had on clay, actually, on the ATP Tour. And it was by Hurkacz, who, historically speaking, is not a great clay player. Didn't win a clay title this year, but 6-1, 6-3 is one-way traffic, and Nadal was on the wrong side of it. Paul ended up beating Karatsev. You saw Shang win the first set against Napolitano. Then he ended up losing the next 2 sets, 6-1, 6-0. Tiafoe continues to suck, as Koepfer beat him in straight sets. Tiafoe's fallen off a cliff, man. He's been awful so far this year. De Minaur ended up winning in straight sets against Baena. Draper and Medvedev had a fun match. I thought Draper might win a set there, maybe even win the match, but Medvedev did end up winning in straight sets, 7-5, 6-4. Fies continues his bad year as Muller beat him in straight sets. Baez and Wlahovic had a fun match. Baez did win that one in 2 tiebreaks. Norrie beat Munar in 3. Thought Struff was alive against Tsitsipas. Like the over, he was alive. Did win the first set via breaker, but Tsitsipas came back and won the next 2 sets, 6-4, 6-4. Ended up completely destroying one of the sponsored, I don't even know what you want to call it, but some type of sponsor paraphernalia, and he ended up taking his racket and smashing it to pieces. So people were mad at Tsitsipas for that. Whatever. He won the match. Not really going to read into it much more. Felix continues his good form. Beat Dzanshulp in straight sets. Rune ended up beating Nardi in straight sets. And Rublev won a marathon, beating Giron in 3. So nothing really else to recap. Do want to briefly touch upon a pretty interesting story on the women's side, which is Giorgi. Now, Giorgi is an Italian, and it's worth mentioning because this event's taking place in Rome. Giorgi officially retired, I think earlier this week or last week, and nobody really knew about it. She kind of sped through filling out the paperwork, never really talked about it, and then her career was officially over. And people were a bit confused what actually happened. And some rumors went out that she actually fled the country. She fled Italy. Apparently, she's in the United States. The main reason for retirement is tax evasion? ? Apparently, she owes the tax federation or authority some money in Italy, and she left. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I don't know if that's actually a true story or not, but there were some rumors going around that Giorgi, let's just say, owed some people some tax money and ended up fleeing to a different country. So yeah, kind of an interesting story there. I'll keep a tab on it, but the point is Giorgi retired, and it could be because she wanted to evade taxes. Maybe. So keep an eye on that story. Anyway, time to get into the actual round of 32 matches. We're going to start off with the Sunday matches, then get into Monday. Full disclosure, once again, I might not have lines on all the Monday matches, but I should have lines on most. Not going to cover all of them, though. Going to get into most of them. So starting off with the Sunday matches. First match I find kind of interesting is going to be between Montero and Kecmanovic. For this one, you're looking at a pretty even number for both guys, but technically Kecmanovic is the favorite as he's around -122. Montero's around +102. As for the game spread, Kecmanovic minus half a game is -115. Montero plus a half is a -105. Over-under set at 23, and the over 2.5 sets is available at +135. They faced off 2 times in their careers. Kecmanovic is 2-0. However, it is worth mentioning that none of those meetings ended up occurring within the last basically 2.5 years. They faced off once on clay back in Buenos Aires in 2021. Kecmanovic won in 3. Faced off in Australian Open qualifying back in 2019. Kecmanovic did win that one in straight sets. So nothing really to take away from the head-to-head. Based on current form, though, I do think that Montero is alive to win this, and I probably would pick him. He's been in great form. Just simply put, he's won 4 straight matches. He's won 8 straight sets here, including qualifying. Beat Moutet in straight sets, beat Monfils in straight sets, and beat Thompson in straight sets. Also looked good in Madrid. Ended up beating Puig in qualifying, beat Albin in 3, beat Lajovic, beat Tsitsipas, and ended up losing to Lehecka, who was in great form in straight sets. But the point is Montero's been very good. Kecmanovic has kind of struggled recently, and even in that win against Ruud, it did look like he was struggling physically a bit in portions of that match. So with that being the case, I think I am actually going to go with Montero here at around even money. I think he's in line to put together a good showing, and I think that he's going to be able to get the job done. I don't mind the over. 2.5 sets at +135, I think, is a good deal. But based on where these odds are located, you could argue that Montero should be the favorite. So because of that, I am going to go with Montero money line at around +102 as my main lean on that one. But I do like the over 2.5 sets as well. Moving on to the next match. Going to look at a matchup between... who do we want to go with next? For this one, we're going to go with Fritz and Korda. For this one, you're looking at Fritz being a decent favorite, but you might have thought it was going to be bigger. Fritz is around -166. Korda is around +146. For the game spread, -2.5 for Fritz, +2.5 for Korda. Over under 23. And the over 2.5 sets is set at +135. Korda to win a set is -170. Fritz to win straight sets is +140. They face off one time in their careers was a clay event. It was actually in Monte Carlo in 2022. Fritz did win that one 7-6, 7-5. Korda, though, we know has been a head case this year, and he's been up and down pretty much the entire year, but he did win a title in doubles, coincidentally, with Thompson, of all people, in Madrid. So congrats to them for winning a clay title in doubles. Then he kind of parlayed that into a 3-set win against Caboli. Did mention that the Italian fans were insulting him and calling out his girlfriend and some over-the-line stuff, and I'd say it was a pretty fun dig that Korda had back at the fans, thanking them for giving him the energy boost that he needed to win. So nice job by Korda handling that situation. Point is, though, I do think Fritz, despite beating Fognini in straight sets in the previous round, I think Korda can hang around. Am I picking him to win the match? Probably not. I don't think I would ever trust Korda enough to actually pull off the upset in any match because I think Korda's a psychopath. But I do think that the over 2.5 sets is worth consideration at +135. I see a close match. Simply put, the first meeting on clay almost went to 2 breakers, and it's still total 25 in straight sets. Give me a competitive match, which I think I'm going to lean Fritz with, but I do Fritz in. But I do think you're looking at a spot where Korda can win a set, force a breaker or 2. I don't mind the over, and I definitely don't mind the potential over 2.5 sets at a good price of +135. Moving on to the next matchup, you have Djokovic taking on Tabilo. For this one, Djokovic obviously a massive favorite, as Djokovic is around -1,000. Tabilo's +700 for the game spread, -5.5 for Djokovic, +5.5 for Tabilo. Over/under games is set at 19. For set wagering over 2.5 sets is +325. Djokovic winning straight sets is a -325. Now, Djokovic was pretty underwhelming to start because Moutet broke him a couple of times in the first few service games that Djokovic had. Then he flipped the switch and looked great. So we know Djokovic has won this event multiple times. I think he's won this 6 times. I mentioned it before in the preview episode of the entire event. But he looked good in general. I think he won 5 straight games in the first set, and then he ended up winning 6-1 in the second. Tabilo, though, has been good. Won a clay title in a challenger event in France, beat Munar in straight sets in the final, ended up beating Hanfmann in straight sets in the first round here. Djokovic is obviously going to win. I'm not going to pick Tabilo to pull off the upset, but 5.5 games for a guy that I think can actually possess some issues for Djokovic's return game. Djokovic, we know, is the best returner of all time, but Tabilo, as a lefty, has a lot of underrated serve skills, and I do think that he can showcase variety. He can use some power. He could also, I don't mind the slicer out wide. Point is, though, I do think Tabilo can actually hold serve more often than the odds maker suggests, particularly in the first set. So maybe you can get a better line in play than 5.5. I think you might end up seeing them on serve at 2-2 or maybe even 3-3, and then Djokovic eventually breaks through and wins the match. I don't see Djokovic fully running away with it. I think he's going to win in straight sets, but I think that expecting him to win like 6-3, 6-2 is a bit much for me. I see potentially a 6-3, 6-4 type match, so I guess based on that, I'm going to lean to Tabilo plus the games. Am I going to bet it? No. I think that is definitely not worth fading Djokovic in an event that he's won 6 times. But Tabilo is a pretty underrated clay player, and I think that he's in line for a pretty, I'd say, respectable showing where he's going to lose, but I think he'll be able to avoid getting completely buried. So give me Tabilo plus the 5.5. Not a strong opinion, not going to bet it, but that's where I would lean into that one. Moving on to the next one, going to look at a match between Zverev and Darderi. For this one, you're looking at Zverev being a big favorite, obviously, as he's around, just to go through the actual price, he's around minus 477. Darderi is around plus 372. Minus 477 plus 372. Zverev minus 4, Darderi plus 4, over under set at 21.5. For over 2.5 sets, you can find plus 170. Zverev in straight sets is minus 145. Now, Zverev, we know, is a very solid clay player when he's on, but recently has been a bit up and down. As you're looking at his results, ended up beating Vukic comfortably in the first match here. Doesn't really mean much to me. Vukic isn't a good clay player. In Madrid, looked very good against George, looked very good against Chapo, then ended up losing in straight sets to Cerundolo. In Munich, ended up beating Rodionov, then ended up losing to Garin in straight sets. You get my point, though. A couple of ups, couple of downs, but Darderi, I think, is definitely a good enough clay player to make Zverev nervous and to potentially steal a set here. Now, do I think he's going to? I don't know, but beating Navone that comfortably, I think, is a very impressive win, personally. So I think I am going to link to Darderi here. I think plus 4 is a pretty solid deal here. It's around plus 105, so shop around. You can probably find 4.5 at like minus 130, give or take, maybe a little bit higher, minus 140. But I think that Zverev is going to win. Do I think that it's going to be easy? No. I think Darderi's a very solid clay player. I think you're going to see a lot of long rallies, and I think you might end up seeing it go to 3 sets. So I don't mind the over. I don't mind the dog here, but I think Zverev eventually finds a way to win this match in either 2 or in 3. Moving on, though, to the matches on Monday. So starting off with the first match, should be a banger. Actually, I don't have the official schedule. I just have all the matches listed, but the point is the first match that I have on the actual schedule for now is Felix against de Minaur. For this one, de Minaur is going to be a favorite, but not a big one. He's around minus 161. Felix is around plus 130. Felix, though, has been good in the head-to-head. He's actually 3-1 lifetime against de Minaur. They faced off one time on clay, and de Minaur did win in Portugal back in 2018 in 3. It was 2018. Doesn't mean anything. That was 6 years ago. So toss that in the garbage. They have not faced off against each other in the past year and change. So I don't know if head-to-head actually matters, but Felix has been in good form. Did beat Dzanchov in straight sets after a pretty respectable run there, losing in the final in heartbreaking fashion to Rublev. As for de Minaur, he's been kind of up and down in the clay season. Ended up beating Baena, though, comfortably in the first round. I think for the first match, I should say, for him, I'm going to lean to Felix here. I think plus 130 is a good deal. He's been good in the head-to-head, and he's been solid lately on clay, making the final of the Masters 1000 event. Yes, there were a bunch of retirements, and he was pretty lucky with the actual way the draw played out for him. But he's still been in good form, and I do think that he can definitely showcase his firepower against de Minaur. So I think I am going to lean to the dog here. I might go 3 sets, but I'm going to lean to Felix to get the job done at a pretty decent plus money price. Moving on to another fun match, you have Baez taking on Rune. Rune is around minus 175. Baez is around plus 138. For the actual head-to-head, it is tied 2-2. Rune did win the last event on hard court in Basel, won in straight sets. Faced off in Buenos Aires in 2022. Baez did win that one in straight sets. Faced off in Santiago, Chile in 2021. Baez won that one in straight sets. Faced off in Santiago again earlier that year, about a week before, and Rune did beat him in straight sets. So the point is Baez has won each of the last 2 clay meetings. All the matches ended in straight sets. So I don't know if that means anything, but the point is you might be able to expect one of these players to I don't want to say roll over if they fall behind, but you might end up seeing one player jump out to a lead, keep that momentum, and find a way to win it in straights. Baez has been up and down recently. We know he's a very solid clay player. Did win a Masters 500. He won an ATP 500 event in, I believe it was Rio earlier this year. But then after that, he has not been that great. Ended up losing to Rinaldi in Barcelona, beat Van Asch in 3 sets, then lost to Fritz in straight sets there in Madrid, then beat Lajovic in straight sets 7-6, 7-6. Rune was my, I'd say, long shot pick or middle long shot pick to win the event. He's been good. Beat Nardi in straight sets. Lost to Griekspoor in 3 in Madrid. Beat Navone in 3. Fun match there in Madrid. And then he made a good run early, and then he got killed by Struff in Munich. I still don't know what happened in that match. For this one, though, I think it's going to be a close match. I think that for the sake of value, I think that the value is probably with Baez. I think Rune is going to find a way to win it, but in reality, minus 175 does feel a bit high when the head-to-head meetings have been split down the middle at 2-2. So, with that being the case, I think you're going to see a marathon might go 3 sets personally. I know I just said that the head-to-head would suggest it would end in straight sets. It's also a bit dated, but I think you're looking at a spot where Baez might be able to get the better of Rune, but I think these odds are a bit off. I think Rune should be favored, but like minus 140, give or take. So at minus 175, I think the only value is going to be on Baez. So I'm going to lean that way, but I do think Rune will probably find a way to win the match. Moving on, you have Hurkacz taking on Etcheverry. For this one, you have Hurkacz as a favorite, not a big favorite, though. He's around minus 200, and Etcheverry's around plus 163. Hurkacz, we saw bury Nadal in the match on Saturday, and he's looking to continue his pretty solid clay season. As for Etcheverry, he's been solid, ended up beating Seaboth Wild in straight sets, ended up having a pretty decent past couple of tournaments. Nothing insane in terms of results, but the point is he has been pretty good. Made a good run in Barcelona before losing to Ruud. So we know he's the upside. We know he's a clay specialist, but can he actually combat the serve of Hurkacz? And I think the answer for this one's going to be no. They've never faced off in the head-to-head. Hurkacz did look very sharp against Nadal. I do think that Hurkacz is going to win. Might be competitive, but I don't see much value because I don't have any lines in front of me besides the money line. So I think for this one, I'm going to have to kind of pass on it, but I think Hurkacz wins it. Maybe Etcheverry wins a set, but I think Hurkacz eventually gets the job done to advance to the next round. Moving on to the last match we're going to talk about, we have Medvedev taking on Medvedev. For this one, actually, no, I'm going to cover one more match after this. So you end up having Medvedev against Medvedev, and for this one, Medvedev is a decent favorite. Medvedev is around minus 289. You have Medvedev at around plus 239. Minus 3.5 games for Medvedev, plus 3.5 for Medvedev, over under set of 22. And for the set wagering here, you can find the over 2.5 sets at plus 150. Medvedev to win in straight sets is even money. Medvedev to win a set is minus 130. Now, Medvedev is a guy that I like. I've mentioned him several times as being a potential up-and-comer, especially for maybe a Cinderella run for an ATP title in the next year or so. We'll see what happens, but the point is I do like his form. We end up seeing him look pretty good in Rome, went through qualifying, has not dropped a set, then beat Fokina and Papirin. 2 pretty solid clay players in straight sets, so he's in good form. You're looking at Medvedev, though, and he had the hip issue against Leheshka, which is why he ended up retiring from the event. Then he came back and beat Draper in the first match here. Now, Draper was in very good form after killing Coric in the round prior, but Medvedev physically, you can argue, might struggle if this match gets, I'd say, into the deep stages. I think there's value on the underdog here. Do I think that he's going to win? Probably not. But I think if you're looking at some potential value, might be Medvedev to win a set. Maybe if you want to talk about him to potentially go over 2.5 sets with Medvedev at plus 150. I don't mind that, but I find it pretty fascinating that Medvedev is a champion actually at this event from last year. And yet against a relative unknown for most people, a guy ranked in the 100s, he's a dog to win in straight sets, which is kind of fascinating. So I think it's pretty telling. I think Medvedev has the overall game to win a set here. His serve is very good, which can neutralize Medvedev's return game. And I do think that Medvedev still struggles with his consistency on the clay. So I don't mind the over 2.5 sets at plus 150. I think that's a good price. So I am going to lean that way for that match. For the last one, though, I did accidentally skip over the Tsitsipas and Norrie match. For this one, you're looking at Tsitsipas being a big favorite, minus 500. Norrie is plus 350. For the head-to-head, Norrie's actually ahead 3-2. They faced off 5 times, 2 times on clay. Very dated, though. faced off in the Hopman Cup, and you saw Norrie win that one in 2018. Faced off in Lyon in 2021, and Tsitsipas won that one in straight sets. All the other meetings were on hard court, and they all ended in straight sets. Norrie did beat Tsitsipas in Acapulco in 2022, beat him in the Daria Tennis Cup in 2022 in straight sets, and then you saw Tsitsipas beat him in straight sets in the World Tennis Championship in 2022. So, point is, I do think this line's too big. I think 500 is massive. Now, I get the argument that Tsitsipas is better on clay, but it does seem to me like this line's a bit disrespectful. We saw Tsitsipas have a marathon against Struff. I think you're looking at what should be a competitive match. Not saying it's going to go to 3 sets, but I think you're looking at a spot where maybe you're going to end up seeing Norrie sneak away with a surprising upset. Now, am I picking him to do so? Probably not, because I've noticed Norrie does not always fare well late in, I'd say, big matches. He tends to struggle with nerves a bit. But I think you're looking at Norrie keeping it interesting, maybe splitting the first 2 sets, so I don't mind the over 2.5 sets here at a pretty decent price. But minus 500, give or take, maybe a bit less if you shop around, maybe find 400 or 450. Still feels too big to me. Tsitsipas didn't look great against Struff. I know Struff's in good form, but I think Norrie can make it interesting. So I am going to lean to Norrie there, plus the games, or even maybe getting the job done for the value alone at maybe to win a set or the over 2.5 sets. That's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual preview of the round of 32 matches in Rome. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. Before we continue that, do want to remind you once again that we are brought to you by Underdog Fantasy, and the NBA playoffs are here. Our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy, wants to make it a lot more interesting, and Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports. You can play their pick'em game, which is as simple as selecting higher or lower on player stats like points, rebounds, and assists, and so much more. Make entries of all basketball or mix and match across your favorite sports. You go into touchdowns your money, and it's a ton of fun. Underdog's available in 30 plus states, including California, Texas, and even Canada. And they also have a lot of great options for tennis. They have breaks of serve, they have aces, they have double faults, a lot of fun, unique angles that can make your tennis viewing more interesting, courtesy of Underdog Fantasy. And a reminder, they have a lot of great promos, bonus cash airdrops, and specials, giveaways throughout the NBA playoffs. Make sure to follow Underdog Picks. That's Underdog Picks on Twitter. Keep an eye out. Underdog's available in 30 plus states, including California, Texas, and Canada. They also just launched Champions, their player versus player format in Florida. Sign up today with the promo code SGPN to claim your special pick and the first time deposit bonus up to $250 in bonus cash. Underdog Fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Royal Retro, looking to prove that you know ball. What better way than to showcase your old school fandom than with some old school gear from a classic team? Royal Retros has jerseys, t-shirts, hats, jackets, sweatshirts, and more from the vintage sports leagues and teams that you know and love. The Dirty Bird, the Orange Crush, or the Sack Exchange all make for sick jerseys for real fans. Use promo code SGPN for 10% off your order today. That's code SGPN at RoyalRetros.com to take 10% off your order. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast. Just finished previewing the round of 32 in Rome. Now it is time for the lock and dog picks. Starting off with the lock, I am going to go with 2 matches, by the way, that I purposefully skipped because I realized if I'm going to cover a match in the lock and dog section, then why should I also cover it in the main section? Because I'm going to go through all my points anyway at the end. So I skipped over 2 matches for Sunday. For the lock, I am going to go to the Shelton and Zhang match. And for this one, give me Zhang team total over 11.5 games at minus 150. Bit juicy, but I do like this for a couple reasons. First of all, I think Zhang's actually alive to win the match, and if he wins it, then you automatically end up going over this number because you need 12 games minimum in order to, of course, win a tennis match. But Shelton's been involved in a lot of marathons. We saw him struggle against Kotov. Kotov did go over this number in the first round. Shelton, though, has gone to 3 sets in 4 of his last 5 matches, and the only exception was a straight set win against Makic, who got injured and ended up having to withdraw from other events. So he beat up on an injured guy, and besides that, he's been involved in a bunch of marathons. Shelton is streaky. He's improved his overall mental toughness, but it does seem like he is constantly involved in marathons. So with that being the case, I think Zhang is actually kind of live to make this match very intriguing. And he's also been solid in the event as he's won each of his first 4 sets in this event. We saw him make a deep run. I think it was in Madrid last year where he eventually lost to, I want to say, Struff in the semis. But the point is, Zhang is actually an underrated clay player, and I think that he is in line to potentially capitalize on an overrated clay player in Shelton. We took Kotov for the same logic, and Kotov had Shelton on the ropes. I can see a similar story here. I think you're looking at what should be a competitive match. They faced off one time in the head-to-head. It was at last year's Australian Open, and that match did go to a 5th set tiebreak. Now, I know it's a different year, it's a different surface. Point is, though, we've seen them face off against each other before, and that match ended up going the distance. So I can see a breaker here. I can see a couple of competitive sets. I can see 3 sets, or I also could see Zhang winning because I really think that Shelton is improved on clay, but still not exactly known for being a great clay player. And because of that, it does feel like his odds are a bit inflated in most of these clay matches. So give me Zhang, who in my opinion is an underrated clay player, to go over his team total at 11.5 at minus 150 as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go to another match I skipped on Sunday, going to the Sarundalo and Kashanov match. Give me the over 2.5 sets at plus 130. Sarundalo's gone to a deciding set in 3 of his last 6 matches, and Kashanov's gone to a deciding set in 2 of his last 4 matches. So both guys have been involved in a couple of marathon matches recently, and a plus 130 when each guy has had basically a 50% chance of going to the third set, then I do think there's some value automatically and some meat on the bone. Plus, in the head-to-head, they have been involved in a couple of marathons. 3 of the 4 head-to-head meetings have gone to a deciding set. So these guys get together and usually kill each other. Both guys are in good form right now. I see a very close match, maybe alternating 6-3s to start, followed by a breaker in the final set, something crazy. But simply put, I think you're looking at what should be a back-and-forth affair between these two, and plus 130, I think, is a good price. Give me the over as a result. So once again, the picks for the round of 32, the lock's going to be on the over for the Zhang team total against Shelton at minus 150, and the number's at 11.5. So once again, Zhang team total over 11.5 at minus 150 as my lock. For my dog, give me Sarundalo and Kashanov over 2.5 sets at plus 130. That's going to wrap it up for this episode. A reminder, we're back once again for the round of 16. That will be the next episode, so we're not going to be back on Monday. Maybe Monday night, actually. But potentially early Tuesday morning, so keep an eye out for that. But until next time, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio, find me on the NBA show, find me on the MLB show, find me on the NFL show, and the WNBA show. We're going to have our first episode of the season on Monday night with Terrell and I, so if you do want some extra basketball action besides NBA playoff action, we do have the women's season starting up, so keep an eye out for that. But until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.